Thank you. I hope everything went well. My Zoom just crashed and restarted. So
Good.
um, I had no other questions other than, yeah, this is really needed. And so thank you for that. Hearing nothing else on this one, we'll go on to 6.5, which is purchase order under state contract with GL Capasso. Dr. White?
Yes, this is for roof repairs and wall repair and caulking at Edgewood School. This was done through the state contract, and we're using our SLUF funds to repair this to obviously help with water infiltration into the building.
Okay. And you said these are SLURF funds?
Yes, that
State local fiscal recovery SLURF. Okay, I like that.
yes.
Any comments or questions related to this? Okay, hearing none, we'll talk about 6.6, which is purchase order with Dialine Flooring. Dr.
Yes,
White.
this is for flooring, replacing the stair treads at Korea High School. It's hefty work, but again, this is for safety in our buildings. We've been slowly getting this done. We did Wilbercross uh, late last year, early into this year, and now moving on to Korea.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? My only question is what do you anticipate to be the next school? Is this kind of like working through the schools as needed, or is there one on the
Combination of working through schools is needed, and the finance team is also the facilities team's also figuring out where. And I also just got Hill House was also completed this past year, so this is the last of the big three, and we'll continue working through schools as it's needed.
All right, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? All right, 6.7 is purchase order with Ruotolo Mechanical. Dr. White?
Yes, this is for a new boiler for Ross Woodward, again, still in the SLUF funds. This is to make sure we can heat the building properly for the upcoming year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right. Contracts, 7.1 is Eagle Rivet Roof Services. Dr. White.
And this is our on-call roofer. As we've been spared a lot of rain this year, but we know as we get into the fall and later season, there will be rain. And this is to patch what we need to, again, prevent an infiltration.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, I had none either. 7.2, contract with Environmental Systems Company. Dr. White.
Yes, this is part of our safety work to make sure our buildings have working PA systems. So there's a variety of work has to happen. Sometimes it's small work as cleaning the system that repaired one. Others need extensive work, and this is to work towards that.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Okay, I had none either, so it looks like that's the end of these action items. So I'll go ahead and make the main motion here. And that is I move we send to the full board these 3 abstracts, 3 agreements, 1 amendment, the 7 purchase orders, and 2 contracts as listed in our agenda.
So
Se- Second, or I
All right.
guess you moved it already.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Ms. Downer?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The motion carries. So we will jump now into reports and discussion. The first one is special education funding related. Ms. Jackson.
Hi, how are you? I'm sorry, I was just texting Pat because I'm on my way into the office. If Dr. White, do you mind as I'm transitioning. Do you mind just sharing the screen for me?
If you prefer, we can move on to 9.2 and come back to you when you're
Yeah,
situated.
that would be helpful because then I'll
I
take it.
prefer that too. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
So we will do that. So 9.2 is an update on plans for facility management. Dr. White.
Yes. Currently, the team is working on the proposal, what would go into the next version of that. But at the same time, we're also completing a cost analysis of what it would be to bring some or all of the services back in-house, as well as what would be a reasonable timeline to achieve that. The plan is still to complete that analysis and make a decision that we'll have a contract out by November, which is still plenty of time to get it through all pieces if we go that route and be able to contract and have knowledge transfer if a successor bidder if we choose a successor to our current vendor.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I guess the question that I have is, as you finish the analysis moving forward towards the time when you plan to have the thing posted in would be a request for qualifications, I imagine, in November. Do you want more time on the committee calendar to talk about what those plans are and the results of your analysis in terms of what
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. If you would please advise Ms. DeMayo and the superintendent when you're ready for that, before it's all posted. I imagine there'll be questions about the details once the details are known. All right. And as long as we're at it, why don't we, if there's no other questions, pause for that. Okay. 9.3 is an update on custodial transition.
Yes, we have transitioned to our new provider. They are operating, have their stationed at 375 Quinnipiac in the facilities building and have off space and up and working. They are closely tracking their attendance. They are also still staffing up and have had to have some replacements come in because they have been doing their due diligence to make sure everyone is cleared to work with and around children, regardless of what time they're coming into the building. So, so far things have been going well in those regards of the expectations we have, and working closely with Ms. Hopkins on making sure that this is happening.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? My one question is, thanks for the update and glad the transition occurred. Do you have a sense of when, or do they have a sense rather, when they're going to be fully staffed? And when you say they're staffing up, are they not able to cover all the buildings adequately right now because they don't have enough people, or is this, how's that happening?
Staffing up to get to the full contracted number. The last check-in, they were at approximately 150, so about 35 short of the number right now, and working to close that gap very quickly. It really, once they get people in, it's about how quickly background checks can come in.
And as far as their payment is, we're paying for the actual work of actual people doing actual
Correct.
hours. No,
Correct.
okay. I'm pretty sure of that, but I wanted to confirm. Yeah. All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay. So if Ms. Jackson's ready, we could drop back for special education funding, or we could talk about the change order report.
We could do the change order while getting.
Okay.
So, and I will get this posted. This is a review of the change orders. Everyone's seeing the change order screen, correct?
It's still coming up. There it is.
Okay. So this is summary of the change orders from the previous year. As you see, there's significant around snow removal. We've worked on how that's going to be allocated this year so that we're in a better place that should not have these change orders, significant change orders this year. We're working on the front end to prevent that. And then you see a lot of these capital funds. It's been around extension of the dates of the contracts because some of the things have run across fiscal years. So had to be reorganized for change.
Okay. So are there comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting this and also speaking about our strategies and plans. I'm just looking at the last two lines for the milestone construction for Hill House. Where are we on the work there? So is it saying it's under budget or saying we haven't invested financially in the work yet?
No, that work is complete. And I'd have to check in with the team about why it's in the red, but this was completed work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Downer.
That would have been my question.
Okay.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. I'll just note and I'm glad to see, I mean, looking at the tabs, I assume that that's going to be that we have the change order reports on the same spreadsheet in different tabs for the different years. So a decreasing number of change orders, which I think is good, shows progress on planning and all that. So I think that's great. You mentioned the snow. And then if this could just be posted sometime between now and tomorrow morning,
Will do.
that would be great. And that covers my questions. Okay.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here now. I'm just trying to get onto the computer with the actual Zoom meeting, and then I can go ahead and share my screen as well.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask Dr. White, I'm going to send it to you. If you don't mind sharing that, you should have a copy of it. Or actually, wait, hold on. Let me see if I could do it right here. I think I'm coming on. And then I will share my screen from this one. I'll get off of this other one. And then you
Okay.
should.
While you're doing the final connection there, I'll just say for the policies 11.1, I said I was going to do some work. I started to look at that and it took more work than I had allotted time for. So I don't have an update other than to say I will have an update at our next meeting as regarding the data sharing policy. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you.
Just do that while we're getting situated here.
Okay. You should now. I'm going to get out of this. All right. Should be all set now.
We can hear you.
Perfect. Just open up my screen. Give me 1 second for the presentation, and then we will be all set. Right. Everyone can see my screen?
It looks like it's loading.
Can you see it? On my end, it seems like it's shared.
There we go.
There you go. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you again today relative to special education funding. There's a lot of things that are going on, even at the state level, that I'll talk about a little bit later as it relates to special education funding. I did do somewhat of a similar presentation in December of 2024, but just giving some updates of some of the things that we know that are going on in special education, some of the legislative updates, just some of who we are in the district really as it relates to special education and our funding. So again, just so that everyone understands, this is who we are in special education. We have a little more than 3,000 students in our district. A couple of things that you're going to hear me talk about is that although in some subsequent slides, although our slope of increase is not steep, the student type definitely does matter. We have, over the last many years, continued to increase what we call our specialized classrooms. These are students who require a lower staff to student ratio, students who have more complex needs, students who have coexisting cognitive disabilities, and sometimes students who may have issues with not ambulatory, limited language, et cetera, just to paint a picture of the students that I'm referring to. One of the things, if you can just note, actually, let me share with you our continuum of service. We range from our students who are included in our mainstream classrooms. We educate those students all the way to students who are in our hospitalized. So there's a range of services that we have. Within district, we service many students, visual impairments, cognitive impairments. Like I said, again, students who may not be ambulatory. There's a whole host of students that we have. But what's been the trend of note is that the number, if you look at the data points that are at the bottom of the slide, is that from July to September 30, we had close to 40 students, 39 students who required specialized programming come into our district, which is significant. So when we think about again, the costs and big cost drivers of budgets in district, you'll see that many districts are talking about special education, but especially in districts like ours where we're very transient, that matters, the number of students that we have that require specialized support. So these are students who require either going to an out-of-district placement and or students who require this very specialized programming. We continue to create new classrooms every year. The number of students that we have that are coming in from our pre-K programs who require specialized program continue to grow. And again, the law states that we have to keep our certain student types within special education to age 22. So on the back end, we're not exiting students from services at 22 while we're still receiving a whole host of students in our district, which means, again, the struggle around special education services, not just in general, but really for the point and purpose of some of the discussions that I will be having today, it's really concentrated on that number of kids that really require significant level of support. So as I mentioned to you before, again, our data trend is not steep. Our data trend is not steep as far as the enrollment is concerned. But I just use this particular data slide for students with autism spectrum disorders, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear anytime if I've presented this, that this does not mean that any student with autism spectrum disorders requires one of the specialized programmings that I'm talking about. However, there is a significant portion of the students that I'm referring to that require that level of programming. So you can continue to see that the slope is somewhat steep for students that require that level of programming and support. The amount of money that we've continued to pay in our out-of-district placements has been significant. It doesn't mean that we've had a significant increase in the number of students. I've given the example that in one of our providers where we had 134 students over multiple years, within 3 years or a few years, I don't want to say three, within a few years, it was a $2.8 million increase. And that was, again, not much change in our actual number of students, but the actual rate increase in tuition. So when I'm talking about rate increases, you'll see that for some of the students I'm talking about, it could be anywhere between $80,000, $150,000, $200,000, and that's just for tuition in and of itself, not inclusive of a actual cost for transportation. So this special education tuition cost has risen over the past 5 years. And if you remember the conversation that I had right at the beginning, the number of students that we had come in that required specialized programming. Either we've created the programs in district or they've been out of district. And if you take a look at our spending compared to the state, again, the amount of spending that you've seen over the last 4 years, you'll see that the total number of spending has gone, the total number of spending increase. Same thing at the state, but you'll see the number of special education tuition increase. And then you'll see that for all of our special education spending in district, as demonstrated on this slide, the majority of our special education spending is on special education tuition. I'm going to pause there just for a moment because one of the things that you will hear is that there's a lot of talk about bringing kids in district, bringing kids in district. We continue to prevent students from going out of district by continuing to create those programs. If we did not have the 43 specialized programs that we had in district, the cost that we would have for a student in out of district placement would continue to grow every year. We have made a decision that there are some students that we feel that we could service in district as opposed to in some other places, in some other regards, that those students would be kids that we would otherwise outplace. The one thing I will tell you, we are concerned with this population and our teachers and the number of students that continue to come in. Because when the students are coming in, we don't have a choice to say, we can't program or can't service. But again, we are, scrambling around to make sure that we're actually connecting students to service, making sure that we're putting them in programs, but also to making sure that we're preserving our teachers who are in in these programs. Again, for specialized programs, it's not every special education teacher is, coming out of school and saying, I want to be in a specialized program. It is something that, again, a small population of folks really, are choosing a specialized classroom to be able to service. So I just want to share that as well, because we do have many programs that we have where we're continuing, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we're continuing to recruit special education teachers, which is great. The only thing that becomes sometimes a challenge is, how do we match folks to these types of programs? And then you have a whole set of other services for students with disabilities that are above and beyond just special education teachers that we have to monitor. This is just looking at our allocations for special education. This is, the from the federal government, the pass-through through the state. You can see the allocations over the course of the last few years. This is a 2-year grant. I'll pause if anyone, I won't say much, but you can see, obviously, for this year, it went down just a little bit, but this is only covering just a portion of our expenditures. And you can see on this slide how we spend the money. So the majority of what we spend our money on is between instruction, which is salaries, salaries for teachers, related service staff, benefits, followed by benefits, and then looking at tutors. Right now, we don't have one of the things that's been very hard to find, and this is not just an indication of New Haven, it's a statewide challenge of looking at special education paraeducators. So we utilize for special education teachers and paraeducators, we're using a lot of part-time tutor dollars, enough to be able to fill any gaps that we have for full-time staffing. And then the last thing that you'll see that's one of the big drivers in the IDEA cost is really what we call people services. Again, that's looking at nursing contracts, that's looking at our, portion of our K-5 program, looking at some of the behavioral contracts and a couple of speech as well. So that's where a good portion of the allocation of our expenditures. And again, you see some of it has since changed and update, but again, these are pretty much the places in which we actually are spending the money on the grants, as I mentioned previously. Also within the grant, there's a small allocation for preschool. So for preschool, we're pretty much just paying for a few paraprofessionals and their benefits. It's what we pay for with the preschool dollars. And this is only, like as I mentioned before, the federal dollars. If you're looking at the general fund allocations, so for tuition, it's about $26 million right now currently. I did not add a slide, but the tuition cost actually is higher than that if you look at what's called excess costs, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The state has continued to increase the amount of money that we receive in excess cost reimbursement. So that has offset some of the tuition expenditure. So that money comes back so that it offsets the tuition expenditure, which we've been grateful that has continued to increase. However, it's still a huge cost. contracts. As I mentioned before, some of the contracts come before you, whether it's the same things of nursing, speech contracts. Again, same kinds of things that are required. And then you could see some of the things that we give an allocation to our staff with some of the salaries, some of the part-time that we continue to use. The special education, transportation for special education is something that is a huge cost driver. You see the cost for out-of-district placement. It could be anywhere between $60,000 to $80,000 a year just for one student for out-of-district transportation, and then the special education transportation of what we utilize for our specialized vehicles and vans within district. That's the cost that we're spending within our general funds. And this does not include, just so that everyone knows, this does not include the salaries for the staff that service students with special needs. This was what I included back in the presentation in December of 2024. I did not do like I did last time and outline and highlight in each of the schools, the vacancies and what we needed. We had a summary sheet of what would it really take if we really wanted to do our due diligence and making sure that even, for an example, like a specialized classroom, we wanted to have a 1 to 10 ratio, which is optimal. If we want to look at a 1 in a 20 is a ratio that we would look at for, a student more, in a resource or caseload in a resource setting. That's what it would take in looking at the caseloads of all of the folks within related service, school psych, social work, et cetera, et cetera. But we know that this is, again, how do we get to this point? But where we are spending our money, as I mentioned before, is really looking at how we continue to build out those specialized classrooms enough to be able to manage, and where we're looking at for places like speech and language pathology and even school psych, we now continue to increase the number of contracts that we have when we don't have full-time staffing. A couple things, just enough to address some of the staffing needs. So we have in our district, I think we've been doing a really good job. Even if you look at we've been talking with some of our colleagues, our vacancies has not been astronomical, comparatively speaking, of what we look at. We have alternative routes that we've had with CREC, where it's our general ed staff become special education staff. We've had residency programs with with Southern Connecticut State University, which is a concentration of our paraeducators who've become special education teachers. And then we newly have or added the Yale Fellowship Program, where 20 of the 23 fellows are special education staff, which has been amazing and great to be able to maintain staff. We also have somebody within our department that in order to streamline efficiencies, even with HR, where they're doing most of the connection with HR, so that it's not multiple people within our department, that we have one person who's designated to help streamline the process with HR to try to get folks on as quickly as possible when we're able to, interview and find candidates, and being able to make sure that we're connecting with our principals. Recruitment efforts, we've been utilizing recruitment efforts to include social media to continue looking at our staffing. I do believe that I'm confident in our efforts with special education teachers and how we're able to continue to use our alternative route for certifications. Where we struggle are really looking at the pathways for recruiting other places that are a national shortage area, like speech and language pathology, looking at places like with school psychology, even behavioral staff, and how we're able to look at those particular entities as we're looking at special education, because related service staff also matter when we're looking at service delivery for special education as well. And we actually did an initial exploration with Southern Connecticut State University as it relates to speech and language pathology. Not as straightforward as our teaching staff, but more to come on that, hopefully in the near future. Once we get folks in, one of the things that we are looking at and constantly trying to take a look at is really looking at the percentage of special education students within our buildings. There used to be a time where we're looking at it and then take from here, put over here, but ultimately we can't predict from year to year outside of those places that are not our magnet schools, really what's the student population? What is it going to be? How do we get around really looking at concentration of students with special needs in different places. So really continuing to look at that the increase of our specialized classrooms. As I mentioned before, our teachers within those classrooms, we now, in some regards, in some classes, have had up to 17 kids, where we know in years past, we don't like to go over 12 to 14 kids in those classrooms because we feel like it compromises the integrity of those programs. So now continuing to look at how we continue to increase those classrooms, we hear from teachers all the time. Sometimes they don't even know we've increased the number of classrooms because it doesn't feel like it to them, because we're trying to keep up with a rate of influx of students requiring this type of programming, with the number of classrooms that we're continuing to create. We also know, as I mentioned before, this is not an indication of just New Haven, but in the state of Connecticut as it relates to paraeducator support. We know that that's been a shortage area across. We've heard that loud and clear. The State Department of Education mentioned that in their opening back to school meeting with special ed administrators. Looking at Kelly services, and as I mentioned before, we utilize a lot of part-time folks just to be able to help support in those classrooms. And the whole notion of us doing all of these things is really making sure that we're trying to retain the staff that we do have. Some of the efforts that you see that have happened at the State Department of Education, there's a lot of work that the legislation has done around special education funding. So some of the things, as I mentioned before, this notion of what we call excess cost grant, the excess cost grant really is just looking for those kids who are the highest cost kids that are in our out of district placement. And you don't get the total reimbursement, but you get a percentage of a reimbursement for those students into your district. So this, for the for us, for the school system, we're still, paying a significant portion of the tuition, but the continued increases of the excess cost grant that the legislation has continued to push for has continued to help us to offset district tuition costs, and also really the ability to create these specialized classrooms. Some things that you've heard me talk about here in the past, sometimes with charter school billing, sometimes also too with open choice, there's what's written into legislation about reasonable cost. There's been always this notion about what is reasonable cost, how are we billing, who's making decisions about those kinds of things. So there's been a lot of effort and energy around this notion of reasonable cost and rate setting, so that this way the legislation is really looking at how we're making these determinations, so that there's no longer these disputes, that we can look at, rates that are reasonable, that even with out of district placements, that there are rates that are reasonable, so that staff are not, or not staff, but districts are not continuing to see these huge increases I mentioned before, where the out of district cost, even if the number of students has not changed significantly, the costs have, because the individual vendors, their tuition rates have gone up year after year. So there's a lot of work that's being done by way of the legislation around this notion of rate setting. And then the one thing that's coming in, there's a few other things that are coming in, but the last thing that I'll talk with you about right now is we have what's called a Special Education and Expansion Development Grant that's coming in to the district, which will allow, it's about close to $1.9 million. And a part of that, how we're looking at that, is really, again, some offsetting of tuition for students who are coming in after July 1. Again, continuing to expand our specialized classrooms, and we have to do that to preserve the staff that we have in district. Really looking at all the efforts around keeping folks into district, hiring more behavioral specialists to assist with the students who may be continuing to have significant issues, social, emotional, behavioral needs within the district, looking at increasing hiring support, social work support, technology for students with communication needs, and then again, looking at a district, the composition of a district climate or district crisis team specifically for students with complex social, emotional, behavioral needs. And all those things, again, with an effort of being able to maintain and keep our students in district, as the efforts to be able to not continue to increase out of district tuition cost. And the reason why we have to do these things too, outside of just keeping costs what they are, right now, even in these out of district placements, there's no placements for kids. Right now, for some regards, we have some kids where even if we needed to place them in an out of district placement, it could be a 3 to 6 month wait before we can even get a kid into a program. Sorry, somebody has a phone somewhere. Hold on, guy. Oh, sorry. I think that's it. There's someone around me with a phone. I'm not able to turn it off because I don't know where it's coming from. And then, sorry, oh, then you found it. And then I think that's it. If there's any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Questions?
Yes.
Dr. York?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for your presentation and also your command of this division and aspect of our learning environment. In terms of creating the specialized classrooms, what's your sense of the scope or how many we may need in order to provide the level and amount of services that we would like to as a district?
I think that right now, if we were to get back to the staffing guideline of what we talked about, so I won't put an exact number on it, but I'll just kind of give you what this is. Right now, our specialized classrooms, the 43 that we have, we're housing anywhere between 14 to 17 in some of those classrooms. If it were such that we had our optimal experience for those students, it would be 1 in 10. So if we were able to do the math across the programs, that's what we would be looking at in order to actually have the number of specialized classrooms. We are continuing to create the programs, but what I worry about is really looking at all of the services that it takes to make those programs run.
Thank you. And some of the driving factors or lagging factors would be staff certified in special education and the funding.
Right. I don't think just the funding piece is a concern. I do believe that it's both and. So I think that you have, even if you have a special education teacher, don't forget for many of our kids, many of them who are in our specialized programs, you also need a speech and language pathologist. You also need school psych who are going to evaluate. So I think we're doing, as I mentioned, with our alternative programs, I think we're doing a good job recruiting special education teachers. I do worry about teacher type because not everyone signs up to be in a specialized program. So even as a special education teacher, it's a very specialized area of special education, if you will, right? There's not,
Got it.
there's no specific certification. You're a special education teacher. However, not everyone signs up to be in a specialized classroom, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? So I'll just say thank you very much for this presentation. Very thorough. Appreciate having the financial information that's in there, talking about the staffing requirements and needs. It might be a place to, in future versions of this, to bring in some of the information from the staffing guidelines report about the gaps. Because I imagine, just like everything else in the district, there are gaps between what we think we need based on professional judgment, national standards, et cetera, as well as what's available due to the funding that we have. I appreciate you having the information about the increased state funding, which, if I remember correctly, is yet another plan of the state to have phased in funding, and it's not fully funded what they're doing. Hopefully this goes faster than the ECS phase in, which I think was 8 years, I think. So my question for you is, based on all that, I mean, is the big driver funding in terms of having the classroom sizes where they need to be in order to be best for the students? Or is it inability to be able to find enough people to do the work because these are all shortage areas, or both? Or
It's both. I think it's both.
okay. So, but we were more fully funded, that would probably be quite helpful.
Yeah.
For
And sometimes there's restrictions on dollars too. So some of the things that can offset and I didn't mention that before, but sometimes even with money and how it's brought in, sometimes there's some restriction on some of the things that you can do, but more work to come. I do think legislators are interested in what's going on with special education, given the high cost. So I think just at the bare minimum, just to educate students with disabilities, I think you're going to see more to come.
Yes, and thank you for that. That is a good point. Yes, we do need to acknowledge that the Connecticut legislature and the governor are trying to address this. They're aware of the issue. I think they've been also working with the School State Finance Project, which I noticed some of your information came from them as well. They seem to be the leaders in understanding all the different parts and challenges of school funding in Connecticut. So
Yep.
uh, progress is great.
Okay. Yep.
Any other comments or questions on this? Okay, well, thank you very much for that detailed presentation. We do appreciate that. And in looking at the agenda, the only other thing left is that we haven't covered already is the upcoming financial issues. Are there any that the administration wants to let us know about? Hearing none, we're at the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We shall vote. President Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Downer,
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.